So following lesson 2, actually, we're going to jump into some biomechanics now, with the idea being is that there's some things we need to learn about laws of motion and biomechanical principles, as well as the phases of movement that we're then going to take and apply and add into the fundamental movement skills course. So it's kind of a supplementary thing. But these are expectations that we're required to learn through this course right here. So this section here is looking at laws of motion and biomechanical principles. And it's important to know these because basically all movement is impacted by these. And so understanding these can really help with instruction, teaching, and understanding how things sort of work. So this sort of starts off with some things about a bicycle to sort of think about. And then in this case, some general stuff about biomechanics. So there's a bunch of videos for you to watch. There's some mini biomechanics labs to do. And then there's a chart that you can use to help keep track of your learning. But Newton's 3 laws are really important. So this first video is going to cover, or these videos cover Newton's laws. So there's the first law, second law, and third law. At some point here in the assignments that are going to follow, you're going to have to provide examples of each one of these. So it's important to make sure you understand what those are. There's a lab to complete that deals with Newton's 3 laws. So this is the first thing in which you're going to find examples of that. It then talks about levers, and so understanding the different types of levers. There's different classes of lever, as you'll see in this video, and it'll explain it to you. Some levers are more common than others, but in most cases, or in all cases, you've got a fulcrum and you've got an output and an input. And as the fulcrum moves, then that sort of changes what type of lever it would be. So that's information that you need to make sure you cover. Again, your first class lever, your second class, your third class, so information you can figure out there. Then there's a quiz to complete to demonstrate your understanding, whether you know exactly how the levers work at that point. The next principle we're going to take a look at is the principle of stability. So there's some different principles that relate to biomechanics. So the second one is dealing with the stability piece. And so you'll go through this whole instruction piece right here. You can take pictures of yourself, or you can find somebody else on the internet that has that same picture being illustrated. It's up to you which way you might do it, and then respond to these questions based on those different positions you put yourself in. There's the principle number 2 is of force. These are your biomechanical principles again. So the production of maximum force requires use of all joints that can be used. All right, so that's one of those principles. Number 3 is velocity. The production of maximum velocity requires the use of joints in order from the largest to smallest. So again, if you think about this in terms of sports, if you don't use the joints in that order, you won't generate the same kind of force. You end up losing different forces, and so the ultimate reaction that you get from it is much less. So it's important to make sure our joints are used in proper order, largest muscles to smallest, in order to get proper performance. This lab here is the production of maximum force. You're going to experiment with that right now. So following these instructions, you'll be able to go through this lab and then submit the information that it asks for you from here. There's then one for the production of maximum velocity. So in this case, you're going to basically be able to pick any movement that you wish to choose from, and then consider the different joints that are being used to complete that skill, and then find an illustration that shows the different phases of movement for that joint being involved, and then continue through with what's being asked right here. Principle 4 is impulse. So it's talking about the greater applied impulse, the greater the increase in velocity. So again, the stronger, the more force that you apply, all right, then the greater the increase in your velocity that will occur. Number 5 works on impulse. So again, follow the instructions here for doing free throws in different ways, and then submit your findings right here through this drop box. Principle 5 is your direction of force application. So again, movement usually occurs in the direction opposite that of the applied force, which makes sense. But there's a little article here about hockey. And so hockey is a little bit different. Think about the fact that we have 2 skates on, and then when you're making a push, what direction is the hockey player going? In theory, should be pushing straight back, but often hockey players don't, or skaters or figure skaters. So how is it that there's an adjustment made, or how is it they end up going straight even though they're not necessarily pushing straight back? So this sort of talks about that here in this article. And then number 6 is a direction of application. So you're going to find a picture that basically of you applying principle 5 and explain how it illustrates the principle, and then use analysis you just read to help with your explanation of how that all works. Principle number 6, production of angular motion or torque. So torque is the principle number 6, and then it's going to, the idea here is that you have angular motion is produced, and it's acting some distance from an axis. All right, so it's important that you kind of take those words in. So again, it's got the illustration of a person pushing on a pedal. The pedal has a piece of metal that then joins it to the gear piece, which then ends up turning. So that's the idea between the forces being applied at some distance from an axis, because your axis is where that pedal attaches to the gear. So you'll work through that. So this is your lab number 7, related to angular motion or torque. And so basically you'll take a good read through this and then basically explain what's going on in this picture. Sort of like I just said, so I gave you a few clues. Make sure you look at the rubric, because the rubric's very specific in terms of the language that you need to use for that. Principle number 7 is the conservation of angular momentum. So the idea here is that the momentum isn't lost, but there's different things we do with our body that can change sort of how fast, let's say, we're spinning. All right, so just sort of keep that in mind. Those are sort of hints, right? So again, the momentum won't change, all right, but there might be a change in the inertia, the velocity, but there's a connection there. So if one goes down, the other has to go up, kind of thing. So it's important to make sure you understand. And here's your formula for this, which kind of helps explain what I just said as well. And then you've got the last one is your conservation of angular momentum. And so in this case, you're supposed to share a picture of that in place. This is your biomechanics lab number 8. So find a picture of something occurring, an athlete, if you can, whereby they're illustrating the angular momentum, and you can explain what's happening.